Installation process. We started by outlining the project on either the slab or the footings. And what I like to do is snap a line, and some people will put a steel angle or a C-channel down in order to lay their block into or to push it up against. There's no right or wrong way of doing that. It's whatever you prefer based on what makes you most comfortable when you're doing it. It just gives you a nice straight edge to work with, especially for the long walls. Then we'll mark out the center of the windows and doors. One of the things that happens is if you do that preliminary layout, you can get your centers of your doors and windows, and that way you kind of measure it out once, mark it on your footings, and then we give a cut line, which usually is the bottom of the opening, and it just makes sure that people, as they start to stack block, they remember where the cut lines are and where the windows and doors open. We'll start out by ordering some rebar from the supplier. Most residential situations, you'll end up with your 20-foot long bars, whether it's 10M or 15M bars, and then we'll cut and bend on site. If it's a commercial job, we quite often do what's called a cut list, and it goes and gets prefabricated and brought to the site as a package. Then we move all the tools inside the building, try and make it, and equipment, to try and make it easier to work with. And one of the things I tell people is once you've done your layout and you've done your measuring, you can now load the job site. Keeping 6 feet away from the inside of the wall lets you put your braces and stuff up easily later, but you get everything down in there so you're working from the center of the building around the perimeter. And the next thing we do is you determine the height of the wall. It's very important to double check where your wall heights have to hit so that you can do any pre-cutting before you start, or whether you need adjusters to make sure you're going to hit the right number. When starting the first course of block, you're going to want to determine the height of the first row. It's very important to make sure that you're going to hit your wall height. Set your corner forms and then lay blocks towards the center of the wall. If you zip tie the vertical joints, it'll make sure things are tight, so when you cut that last block, it'll fit properly. Once everything is on line, measured, set up, then you can lay your rebar in to get ready for the next lap. When you get to the second course of the block, you're going to place the corners the opposite direction. We have corners that have a long tail and a short tail, and we just offset them to create the running bond. Stack the forms towards the center of the wall again. Cut the filler in the same area as the first block to minimize the offsetting of the webs. Tie down the forms to the first row. What we like to do is tie the first 2 rows together to get a good connection, the top 2 rows and the corners, and that way we get the whole wall tied together. And then install your horizontal rebar again. Here's an example of what it looks like to have a footprint laid out, 2 rows high, everything's working, everything's fit, you're on your lines, and then you're ready to carry on with your project. After the 2 rows is when I like to stop and check for level, and then what we'll end up doing is whether we have to cut or shim. It's easily done at that stage when the wall is not not full of much rebar, and you can adjust as required. When that's all done, you double check your level, make sure everything's good, footprint's good, ensure that all the lines are set. Then we use low expansion foam to adhere the forms down to the footing. If you've cut the nubs off, we like to use a continuous bead to make sure we get a good connection. And if we haven't, if we have that space below there, what I like to do is about every foot or so, you do about 10 or 12 inch spray, and that just makes sure these forms get secured down to the footing. Allow it to set, usually about an hour, and then you can carry on building your walls. Subsequent courses, you're going to start at the corners again, always from the corners, work to the center of the walls, and then make sure your horizontal rebar is in. When you get to the top course, you're going to want to tie those blocks down to the one below just to make sure it's secure. And then you're going to install your vertical rebar as per specifications. If you're going to pour above this level, you're going to want to protect those interlock from getting filled with concrete. Makes it a lot easier to carry on up with your build.